Welcome to the Undertale and Deltarune Iceberg, Tier 1, RG03 and 04. These are the royal guards that first appear in the Hotland. And the two of them, they've got some cute interactions with each other, but originally it was meant to be 4. In the files, there's unused sprites labeled RG03 and RG04, the original guards being called 01 and 2. 03 appears to be a weird bug-like monster similar to a praying mantis, and 04 looking like a sort of feline monster. They have a pretty similar sparing mechanic to 1 and 2. This time it's just 2 women who used to be friends that you have to fix their relationship, versus the 2 guys we have in the final game. In the art book, Toby Fox mentions that this amalgamation of the 4 of them is called Asura, or Ashura, a cut amalgamite of all 4 royal guards combined. It would have been really nice to see these other royal guards 3 and 4 in the game, but they might have just been taken away to increase the uniqueness of the first 2. Sans is Ness. Sans is Ness was a game theory video about Sans being Ness. It revolved around Sans being from the Earthbound universe and coming here through a machine in his workshop. And while later on you'll see he was for sure onto something with this machine, Sans obviously wasn't from Earthbound, and it got turned into a massive meme. Which, sure, MatPat admitted to not fully believing in the theory, and it being more a way to just talk about his favorite game, but outside of it being a silly meme, there was a lot of backlash. So much so that when the next Undertale video came out, being on Gaster, I'll talk about him more later, he opened the video with an oddly emotional talk about how people act on the internet. It's fine to make jokes and stuff, but full-blown attacking MatPat as a person was way too far. This hate also piled on with another video of his called How I Gave the Pope Undertale, a video where he talks about how him and some other influencers were invited to meet Pope Francis, and it was customary to bring a gift. MatPat brought Undertale as a gift, and people were mad, saying that the Pope would never play the game, and it wasn't supposed to be a gimmick gift. While other people who were invited to see the Pope gave him an illegal tree, surfboard, a self-written book by the influencer who gave it, little narcissistic there, and MatPat obviously knew the Pope wasn't gonna play Undertale. But it turned into an opportunity to discuss cyberbullying with the Pope, and their talks about it are all on YouTube, obviously way better to discuss a genuine issue than giving the Pope an autobiography. But the backlash from the Sans' Nest video and the Pope one just became awful. Once his video on Gaster came out, he was able to explain everything, and it turned into one of those rare times where people actually apologized and felt bad. Anyways, all the drama ended there, and now the whole Sans' Nest thing even made it into the FNAF movie. Doge. This is Doge, a cut enemy obviously based off Doge the dog. It was cut before release, but was gonna be a bipedal dog in a suit of knight armor. I'll talk about it more later on, as it's one of the few things you can re-implement, but it's for sure one of the more iconic cut things in Undertale. Papyrus's favorite meal. For Undertale's first anniversary, Toby Fox held a Q&A on Tumblr, and one of the questions asked in this Q&A was what Papyrus's favorite food was. Toby would answer as different characters, and Papyrus didn't know his own favorite food, and Sans didn't know which one he noticeably liked more than the others, but when Flowey was asked about it, they said his favorite meal was oatmeal and dinosaur eggs. Yeah, I guess with Flowey's powers, that I'll talk about more later on, they just knew Papyrus's favorite food, even though he didn't know it himself. So that's about it for Tier 1, but you may notice I skipped a couple entries. I'm going to talk about them now, but I'm going to do a very quick recap on the whole sort of story of Undertale. Won't be too long. If you're very refreshed on it, here's a timestamp of where to skip. Anyways, quick recap. It's very much needed for the next few entries. The story of Undertale is a long time ago, humans and monsters fought in a massive war, and the humans won, sealing the monsters underground behind this barrier. Anything could enter, but to leave required the strength of at least a human soul plus a monster soul, or 7 human souls to break the barrier forever. Eventually, a child fell down named Chara and called out for help. Azrael came. He led them to his parents, the king and queen of monsters, Asgore and Toriel, who adopted them. Things were good for a time, but when they found out about the barrier and how it worked, they decided they wanted to break it and free everyone. That required 7 human souls, which required crossing the barrier in the first place. And to do so, they needed a human and monster soul together to cross the barrier. Chara could have easily killed one of their new family, but instead chose to kill themselves, and gave their soul to Asriel to take 6 human souls together. They poisoned themselves with buttercups, a type of flower in Undertale and in real life, and, well, Asriel reluctantly agreed to the plan, so he went to the nearby human village where he was supposed to kill 6 humans and take their souls, but couldn't bring himself to do it. Even when the humans saw him and panicked and started to attack, even with Chara's soul inside him begging him to defend himself, he refused. He went back home where he, wounded, died, crumbling to dust spread over a garden. The Monster King, Asgore, was devastated. Humans had started the war, sealed them there, and now killed his 2 children. So he decided to fight back, announcing the next time a human would fall, they would kill it and take its soul, so that one day all the monsters would be free. He ended up regretting this decision, but he had already announced it, giving the monsters hope. So he couldn't bring himself to take away the encouragement he had given to all of monster kind. His wife, Toriel, hated him for it, so she left, taking Chara's body and went as far away as she could to the ruins, where she sealed a door and buried Chara in the spot where they first fell, and planted their favorite golden flowers on the grave. Years passed, and 6 humans had fallen, one by one, getting past Toriel and dying at some point. At some point during this process, Asgore, hoping to avoid future deaths, asked his royal scientist to look into some other way to break the barrier. As a part of their experiments, they managed to extract something called determination from the human souls they had, and they injected it into a flower from the king's garden, where Asriel's dust was spread. From the determination, it gained will to live. From the dust, it gained Asriel's memories. But it had no soul, no empathy. Asriel, now reincarnated as Flowey, he called himself, found that he could rewind time, having the ability to save and load, but only as far back as him turning into a flower. And that's where the game starts. You, the player, Frisk, fall. You're more determined than Flowey, so you steal his power to save and load. Seeing this, he tries to manipulate you. His plan is to get you past Asgore, where he can take the 6 human souls, and then take yours. Having 7 souls would make him like a god, and he'd easily be able to break the barrier. So you cross the underground and defeat Asgore like you wanted, but then you manage to defeat him too. And that's the whole neutral route. So he recalculates. He doesn't need your soul to become godlike if he can get the 6 human souls plus every other monster soul. So he pulls strings, giving advice and asking favors from anyone he thinks he can get to believe him. Even so, he needs you to get everyone you trust and care about to come to the finale to cheer you on. If he's able to pull that off and you've been nice to everyone throughout the entire game, letting them live, doing side quests, that's the true pacifist route, where Flowey becomes the ultimate god of hyperdeath, Asriel, and is ready to take you on, but you don't fight back. You call out to the goodness and love in the souls he absorbed, and they start to call back. For the first time in most likely years and years, Asriel started to feel again. He breaks down crying. Using his power, he destroys the barrier once and for all, admitting he doesn't deserve to be forgiven, and begs you to look after his parents, then releases everyone. And that's the true pacifist ending. There's also a genocide ending, where you kill everything. I'll talk about that more later on when it relates to the story more. So, with that recap of Undertale, now you'll have a lot easier of a time understanding a lot of the entries. And this next one is very, very interesting and very complicated. Gaster. The first reference we see to Gaster is a man on the river saying, "Beware of the man who speaks in hands." The only text in the game that could be speaking in hands is Wingdings, a font that's made up of different symbols and hands. And this Wingdings font is only used by a man named W.D. Gaster, or Wingding Gaster, which this is by no means uncommon for Toby Fox to name a character off the font they speak in. Sans, Comic Sans, Papyrus. Now, if you've played through Undertale a few times, there's a good chance you've never seen this Mystery Man character. Undertale is odd in how it's coded. To keep every playthrough of the game interesting and unique, Toby Fox created the fun value system. Basically, every time you start a new save, your save gets a fun value, ranging between 1 and 100. So if your fun value of a save is 61, 62, 63, or higher than 90, you'll have a 20% chance of getting a reference to Gaster. Yeah, your odds are extremely low. So what happens in these fun values? Well, if you get these values and hit the 20% odds, you come across gray NPCs that are labeled as G followers, or Gaster followers, and if you get a value above 90, you can come across Goner Kid, which relates to this, but I'll talk about him later. So you come across these Gaster followers, and they say Gaster was the previous royal scientist, and an experiment of him went wrong, scattering him across time and space, or in the sense of the game's code, across fun values. We can interpret this as fun values being different worlds, sort of parallel timelines to each other. Once you're done talking with these followers, they vanish, with a pretty distinct sound. One of the rare events that can happen with these fun values is coming across a strange door, going inside and seeing this strange mystery man, and when you talk with him, he immediately disappears, having the same disappearing sound as these G followers. So there's a connection, without a doubt, between this mystery man and the G followers, but if you reverse and slow down the sound the mystery man and G followers play when they vanish, you can hear Gaster's theme, as it's called in the sound test screen. It's also the only song in the sound test screen that locks you to listening to the entire song before you can listen to anything else. If that doesn't convince you that this is Gaster, understandable, but alongside them also having the same color palette of being black and white, the fun value to encounter the mystery man is 66. The number 66 being incredibly tied in with Gaster. In the files where you view the stats of every enemy in the game, there's one listed for a Gaster character, with all the stats being listed as repeated 6s. Plus, as mentioned with the motif of Gaster being used in the vanish sound effect, Toby Fox doesn't randomly throw around music with characters. He uses it to make connections. Asgore has Toriel's motifs because they were married. Sans' theme has Papyrus's motif because they're brothers. So all of that is to say that the only person this man could be is Gaster. Alright, so this is obviously Gaster. He was the previous royal scientist before Alphys. What exactly happened to him with his experiment that went wrong? Why was he scattered through time and space? Well, back to the fun values. The values act as different worlds, running parallel to each other. Obviously, this is a mechanic to keep the game interesting, but also serves as a part of the lore as well. And the only two people in Undertale who know about there being other worlds, other timelines, are Sans and Flowey. So Sans knows about the timelines. I mean, in the genocide route of the game, he knows about every time he's killed you, and references the other timelines quite a lot. Same with Asriel, the true identity of Flowey. And outside of knowing about the fun values, he knows about the other timelines. Both of these characters also share a pretty distinct weapon. In their fights, they both have very unique looking blasters. Sans's being called the Gaster Blaster in the files, so there's a very strong connection there, obviously. But Asriel's is called the Hyper Goner, and shares a very similar appearance to Sans's weapon. So we'll talk about Asriel first. Since Asriel died long ago, the only reason they're around now is because of Gaster. In the true pacifist route of the game, you come across the True Lab, a location that holds most of the obscure information in the game. In this lab, it's stated that Alphys, the current royal scientist, injected determination into monster bodies to create a strong enough soul to break the boundary and get to the outside. I mean, this was the request of Asgore, so Alphys needed to, but it didn't work. It ended up creating these mutated beings that souls were nowhere close to the power of a human soul. They were just messed up monsters now called amalgamites. Aside from monsters, a small yellow flower was injected with this determination. A flower from the bed Asriel was laid to rest on when they died, creating Flowey, how Asriel was reincarnated. So Flowey, or Asriel, I'll use them interchangeably, have incredible power. I mean, being injected with pure determination. With that determination, you, the player, can save and load games. It's a quite literally game-breaking power. And I'll come back to this. It's very important. Goner Kid, an NPC I mentioned earlier, he's the gray NPC that spawns in if you have a fun value of 90 or higher. Well, when you come across him, he says, "Have you ever thought about a world where everything is the same except you don't exist?" So we know he's talking about the fun values, something only Sans and Asriel know about. And when in the fight with Asriel, he uses the Hyper Goner Blaster. Goner Kid, Hyper Goner, very strong connection. But in the fight, he says, "Every time you die, your friends forget you a little more. Your life will end here in a world where no one remembers you." This can mean that Goner Kid, an NPC that only appears 10% of the time, fun values 90 or higher, could have been killed over and over. Aside from him being like the other Gaster followers, grayed out and rare to stumble across, Asriel's weapon being called Hyper Goner, it seems to be heavily implied that this is what got rid of Goner Kid. So what happened to Gaster, his followers, and Goner Kid is what happens to you if you get hit with Asriel's attack. So how does Sans connect to this really convoluted, timey-wimey storytelling? Now, a lot of the information I've been talking about is read through different panels in the True Lab I mentioned earlier, different entries ranging from 1 to 20. But entry 17 is missing. Sorta. The only way you can access entry 17 is by changing the room that you're in the files of Undertale. If you set the player location to room 264 and boot up Undertale, this happens. Entry 17 being displayed in, yes, Wingdings. This entry is fully written by Gaster, and it translates to Entry 17, dark, darker, and darker. Darkness keeps growing, shadows growing deeper, photon readings negative. This next experiment seems very, very interesting. What do you two think? So the you two part of this is highly debated as to who Gaster's talking to, but at least one of them seems to have been solved, most people believing this is Sans, and it checks out. Sans is known for being extremely intelligent, and there's multiple different things throughout the game pointing to this. When you enter Papyrus and Sans' house, you stumble across a joke book inside of a quantum mechanics book that's inside of a joke book. It's an infinite loop. It just repeats on and on. Now, Undertale can be a pretty goofy game at times, having things that don't necessarily make sense, like dogs being in full battle armor, sitting at taverns talking fluent English, but there are certain rules. Like the laws of quantum mechanics are the same in the world of Undertale as they are in our world. Somehow, Sans broke the poly-exclusion principle just for making a joke book. The principle being defined perfectly by this book. You simply can't have a joke book inside of a quantum mechanics book and then have that quantum mechanics book be inside the previously mentioned joke book. That's not how reality works. Outside of that, because you could for sure argue it's a gag by Toby Fox, Sans has the ability to teleport. Outside of actual coding making him teleport, at the beginning of Undertale you can see Sans do this on the same screen, not being a different zone of a game, because at that point you're just assuming they walked over there. Being on a point where you don't get teleported to a new zone is different. When going left on this path here, you see him at the start, and as you move on, not loading any new areas, he just appears. He's the only one who does this as well, blatantly breaking the rules of the world of Undertale. We can also see at some point he had a relationship with Alphys. At the end of the True Pacifist ending, you can see Papyrus finding out Sans and Alphys knew each other, which is odd that he didn't know, but we'll get to that later. Something that sticks out is when confronted about Alphys and Sans knowing each other. Alphys gets nervous and Sans quickly dismisses Papyrus's question of how they met each other. Well, if you go the completely opposite route throughout the game, the genocide route, you get some dialogue about what Sans and Alphys might have been working on together. We know Alphys is the current royal scientist, Gaster being the previous one. Gaster most likely being the royal scientist Asgore initially asked to try and find a way to break through the barrier. Well, Alphys, possibly alongside Sans, could have been the ones helping Gaster in Entry 17, doing experiments in the True Lab to try and break the barrier through not having to kill humans. As talked about in the genocide fight, Sans mentions they were getting signs of timelines jumping left and right, abruptly ending, and knowing it was you, the player, doing this. Okay, so getting readings, knowing Alphys, Entry 17 mentioning the two people, it makes sense that Gaster would be talking to Alphys and Sans, and that the experiment Gaster was conducting that ended up scattering him across the timelines, Sans and Alphys helped with. Now, we don't know if this experiment that messed up Gaster was 100% the extracting determination, but I'd argue it is. There's a lot of stuff pointing to it. Some people say it's a core. I 100% believe it's the determination machine you can find in the True Lab. And this is that determination machine. Does it look familiar? That's right. It has a near identical shape to Sans' Gaster Blaster and Asriel's Hyper Goner weapon. And the Hyper Goner, we know for sure from the Asriel boss fight dialogue that using it on someone will make people slowly forget about you, scattering you across time and space like the Goner Kid was. So it'd make sense that since this machine is what resurrected Asriel into Flowey, it would share similar characteristics. like being the final experiment that scattered Gaster across time and space. Basically, throughout tons of different bits in Undertale, we know Gaster was the previous royal scientist who was scattered across time and space by a machine that's extremely similar to a blaster that Azrael and Sans use, and that Sans was most likely an assistant of Gaster alongside Alphys in the making of the determination machine, which was the thing that led to Gaster's accident. And Azrael having the Hyper Goner weapon that scattered Goner Kid across time and space was because he was resurrected through the determination machine. That's why it shares a very similar shape. Redacted. This is Redacted, a mysterious entity that can only be encountered 2 times in the entire game. The first is in an unused room called Room Water Redacted, which is pitch black and features the song Premonition. As you move forward, Redacted fades into view. Once you interact with them, they simply say Redacted in wingdings, using the Gaster typing sound. Leaving the room will take you to the Room Sound Test, which features Gaster's theme. The second time they can be encountered is through the use of an unused stable that was placed near Blook Acres. Upon interacting with this stable, Redacted will appear inside of it. When you attempt to speak to them, they will say X in wingdings, once again using the Gaster typer sound. So this character often gets called Gaster, people thinking this guy is Gaster or the one I was just talking about is Gaster. Well, what if I said he was Gaster? Sorta, but not really. It's a bit confusing. Credit to PsychoPomp413 on Reddit for the whole layout of this theory. To start, why do they speak like Gaster? Well, this theory goes that this character are what remains of a character known as Grandpa Semi. Grandpa Semi, after Toby Fox decided to cut him from the game and rework him into Gaster. Grandpa Semi, based on his name, seems as though he was intended to be a possible grandfather of Sans and Papyrus, seeming to be a reference to the semi-serif family of fonts. It seems as though Toby had originally planned a fight against him. The notes for this can be shown from the other side of a piece of concept art he showed a long time ago. It was through see-through paper, so someone colored over all the faded out parts, and then deciphered it into this. So there was for sure a scrapped Grandpa Semi fight. Also in the files of Undertale's demo, Grandpa Semi was listed as one of the many people who could have called Frisk. Being based on the data, it seems that this would have been the person who called to place a pizza order. And lastly, there's an unused jingle called GrandSemi.ogg that can also be found in the files of the demo. This theme was later renamed Grandpa Temmie and used for the Temmie fight for some reason. So why or how is Redacted actually Grandpa Semi? Well, the location of both of their encounters suggests that this character was intended to live in the waterfall. Blook Acres to be specific. And this is important because it's implied that Grandpa Semi was intended to reside in the exact same place. The first piece of evidence for this being the placement of Grandpa Semi in the demo's list of phone calls. He's located right between Sans and Alphys, 2 characters who live in Snowdin and Hotland respectively, suggesting that Grandpa Semi would have been in between, in Waterfall. It's the only region that's between these two. The second piece of evidence being the use of a certain leitmotif in Grandpa Semi's theme, which would eventually be reworked into Metal Crusher. If you don't know, leitmotifs are the sort of pattern you hear in music. It's something Toby Fox uses quite a lot, repeating leitmotifs with connected areas or events, and it usually indicates a pretty strong relationship between 2 characters if it's used by both of them. Like Toriel and Asgore share the same leitmotif because they were married at one point. So back to Grandpa Semi's theme that was reworked into Metal Crusher, a theme that is directly connected to Mettaton, a heavily implied member of the Blook family and former neighbor of Nabstablook. This suggests that Grandpa Semi was planned to live in or around Blook Acres, and there's some unused lines of dialogue for Blook Acres which mention the presence of a skeleton who complains about the specifics of orange and plate attacks. Considering that Sans and Papyrus live in Snowdin and only ever teach us about blue attacks, it can be pretty safely assumed that this was intended to be Grandpa Semi. This could explain why Grandpa Semi was planned to have a fight in the first place, like how certain characters like Doggo in the final game serve as a tutorial for dodging blue attacks. Thanks to the slow-moving sword, Grandpa Semi was likely intended to serve as a tutorial for orange attacks, by giving us slow-moving orange hands to avoid. But after Toby decided to cut him from the game, he had to find a different way to introduce this mechanic, hence why it randomly gets mentioned by Alphys in Hotland out of nowhere. But why would Grandpa Semi be living in Blook Acres? Well, it should be noted that Nabstablook was originally intended to be a test enemy and not part of Toby's original plan for the game. The only reason he made it into the game is because testers liked him so much. It was revealed in the art book where you can also see the old design of him. This implies that Brookacres either didn't exist or was run by some other character, who was originally meant to occupy the role of the important waterfall resident who saves us from Mad Dummy. And considering all the evidence I just mentioned, it seems like Grandpa Semi was the one that was meant to do so. So, now that we've cleared that up, what tells us that Grandpa Semi was reworked into Gaster after he was cut from the game? Well, there's multiple things. The first is that he's the only other mentioned possible skeleton character that we know of besides Gaster. Gaster, aside from being unique and using a very specific font, like how Sans and Papyrus do, as shown earlier, there's lots of evidence to suggest that he was conceived very early on in development. It's also worth noting that Grandpa Semi would have had a lot of connections to hands, since that was what was originally intended to be in his fight that got cut, that we saw in the notes. Gaster also has an important association with hands. His signature font revolves around a lot of different hand symbols, and I mean he's referred to by the river person as the man who speaks in hands. Furthermore, Gaster is clearly inspired by the concept of cut content from games. The particular gimmick of Undertale is how elements of gameplay and game design are an actual part of the game's world, saving, reset, stats, etc. And it would make sense if Gaster also counts as such, representing cut content in video games. Pretty much every video game has some kind of content removed during development, and pretty often there are remnants of that in the game's files, and they sometimes manifest in actual gameplay. None of the characters in normal gameplay ever reference Gaster. The only ones to do so are Gaster's followers, determined by the fun value, and the river person who only sometimes mentions the man who speaks in hands. I mean, it's a pattern. Every time Gaster is referenced, it's determined purely by random chance, so one may complete the entire game without ever hearing about Gaster. Similarly to how elements of cut content may sometimes manifest themselves in a game throughout a glitch or secret. Aside from referencing two fonts, Gaster also contains all the letters to spell Easter egg, which, yeah, forgot to mention, Gaster also kind of references the Aster font in his name. It's just not as important as the Wingdings part, and from what I can tell, it's just more a connection to the character being named off fonts, like Sans and Papyrus. Well, with how self-aware of a game Undertale is, it would seem as if Toby particularly created Gaster to make him the representation of content removed during development that still has a chance of appearing in the game. Not that this discredits any part of him from the lore, though. After all, things that may just be representations of other things are central to the story, like love being the level of violence, as it's revealed through normal gameplay by Sans, judging whether or not you get a pacifist, neutral, or genocide route of the game. So it makes sense that if Gaster is a representation of cut content, that he'd work with an actual cut character that he made as a base for this new character, reworking it into something new and making his lack of concrete presence central to the entire lore. In keeping with this decision, Toby decided to coat what was left of Grandpa Semi's encounters in a layer of metaphorically Gaster-colored paint, by scribbling out his sprite and making him use Gaster's unique style of speech. So all the people saying Redacted is Gaster and the Mystery Man is Gaster, both of them are right. Tier 2. Before this tier starts, the rest of the video is going to have a lot of Undertale content, but also starting now a lot of Deltarune content. If you haven't played it, obviously, spoiler warning. Vessel's name is saved. When you first start Deltarune, you create a vessel, and people assume this was some form of character creation. So everyone made their own little guy, named them, and said if they loved them or not. And the vessel was scrapped, then putting you into the game with Toriel yelling Chris's name right as you start. So most people, including me, assume this data was just scrapped. There wasn't anything saved from it. I mean, it says you can't choose who you are in this world, so why would it be saved? Well, in the files, we can see your creation may be coming back in a future chapter. This is my personal one, named myself Toma in game, and then, well, there's my real name right there. So just like the creation we made in the first chapter, the vessel may eventually come back, at least the name of it. Magic Glass. With how Undertale and Deltarune are coded, sometimes encounters like boss triggers, like undines or followers following you, they'll go over gaps. And instead of finding some workaround to make them go around the gaps, Toby Fox instead made a tweet saying they use magical glass, and added a texture for when they do this, the magical glass itself, where they just summon glass beneath their feet as they cross gaps. Photoshop Flowey True Lab. Photoshop Flowey, this messed up version of Flowey, you encounter after he absorbs 6 human souls at the end of the neutral route. He's the final boss of that route, and, well, if you compare its design to the Determination machine, it looks extremely similar, like Flowey just took over the machine and covered it in plant matter. If he did or not is up for debate, but something interesting about this fight is right before he unveils this form, it shows the 6 souls he's gathered lined up in a specific formation for the creation. The main thing here in the formation is at the bottom, where you can see the cyan and orange souls. Well, Flowey's true identity we know is Asriel, son of Toriel and Asgore, and father like son, when fighting Asgore, he uses his right eye for his cyan, stay still attack, and his left for his orange moving attack. Just a neat little detail that you wouldn't notice unless you did both routes of the game. Asriel Dreamer equals Serial Murderer, just like how Deltarune is an anagram of Undertale, rearranging of letters to show something different, you know, Deltarune's letters being rearranged into Undertale and vice versa. Well, Asriel's full name, Asriel Dreamer, is an anagram as well, for Serial Murderer, which this just shows that Toby Fox is a massive fan of anagrams and having them mean something, but there is a massive one for Asriel that I somehow didn't notice until scripting this. Yeah, Asriel's name is an anagram for Rousey, the character in Deltarune. Hyperdeath Asriel resembles the Deltarune. Asriel's Hyperdeath form heavily represents the Deltarune. The whole shape of it is near identical. But what the Deltarune represents isn't really confirmed. It seems to be different between Undertale and Deltarune. In Undertale, if you talk to Gerson, he'll say, "Oh yeah, the prophecy. Legend has it an angel who has seen the surface will descend from above and bring us freedom. Lately, the people have been taking a bleaker outlook, calling that winged circle the Angel of Death, a harbinger of destruction, waiting to free us from this mortal realm." In my opinion, when I see that little circle, I just think it looks neat. So either meaning here could be true. The Angel of Death would for sure be Asriel, and with him being shaped like the Deltarune in his full form, that works. But the quote angel being Frisk also works out, freeing everyone from the underground. But yeah, no matter what the Deltarune is meant to represent, Asriel is clearly based off of it. His entire Hyperdeath form is pretty much the exact same as the Deltarune. Flowey McDonald's ad voice lines. At the end of the genocide route of Undertale, Flowey says, "That's a wonderful idea." And that's already crazy. I mean, almost all dialogue in Undertale is through text boxes, so hearing something actually said is really odd. But the actual bit of audio played is from the last place you'd think. McDonald's. Yeah, Flowey's voice clip was sampled from a 1965 McDonald's commercial. I'll play the two now, and hearing them together, it's very weird.
Hardy, that's a wonderful idea.
That's a wonderful idea.
Robot Husband. In the Kickstarter for Undertale, multiple things were promised that didn't make it into the game. And it's not like anyone was actually mad about these, but one of them was kind of odd. One of the planned features was you being able to have a robot husband, and you can't do that in the full game. But fans have speculated maybe at one point in development you could romance Mettaton. You can go on really bad dates with Papyrus and Alphys, but nothing with Mettaton. I have a feeling this was more a joke than an actual planned feature, but you'll see later on there's a lot of stuff planned in the Kickstarter that just never came to fruition. Getting killed by Toriel. Toriel is known for being the mother figure of Undertale. She does everything possible to not kill you, and normally you can't be killed by her. But if you really try to get hit, she can kill you. It'll show a unique shocked face for a split second and then you'll die. It was generally pretty easy to do in the demo of the game, but for full release you really have to try and only get hit on specific attacks. It's pretty much an Easter egg with how hard it is to die by her. Most of the time she'll make her attacks completely go around you. Open coffins. After getting the true pacifist ending for Undertale, if you reload your game and go to the coffins for all the previous humans, it'll show all but the red one to be opened. There's no real for sure answer as to why they're open, but a nice theory I've heard is that once the barrier was broken, they were finally given a proper burial. This theory does have a bit of a hole though. It's likely that when Toriel left Asgore, she carried Chara back to the ruins and gave them a proper burial. After the fight with Asriel, Frisk is unconscious for an undeterminable amount of time. Maybe while Frisk was unconscious, Toriel took the opportunity to finally give the humans a proper burial, but the dialogue as Frisk wakes up implies that everyone was waiting around. Toriel leaving randomly to do this wouldn't make any sense. So maybe the contents of the coffins just disappeared with the defeat of Asriel, and now the coffins are just open. But there's no for sure answer as to why they're open. Mettaton Neophyte Aborting Genocide. The genocide route of Undertale requires you to kill every available monster in an area, then to proceed. But with the way Mettaton Neo's death is programmed on the genocide route, they have to be added to the kill count manually. But this only happens in the non-aborted genocide route scene. So the only way Mettaton Neo's death is counted to the genocide route is if you do all the prerequisite kills. If you don't, and instead do this fight first before going back, it'll give you the neutral ending instead. Unused rooms. Unused rooms are kinda weird in Undertale. There's your standard debug rooms that actually mean nothing, but there's also some that are essential to the lore. When trying to gain access to a lot of the unused rooms, you'll end up seeing a dog check, a sort of Toby Fox stop sign. But some of these rooms don't have this dog check. The way the check works is if the room name is above 256, you get the dog. Below, you don't. Like for the room with entry 17, a mystery entry that seems to be essential for understanding the story of Gaster, the room ID is 264, meaning Toby Fox intended for people to eventually find it, and didn't want to get in the way. And while there are some interesting finds in unused rooms in Deltarune, it's primarily Undertale that shines in this category. Deltarune primarily has a lot of testing areas. Later in the video and in future videos, I'll talk more about unused Deltarune rooms. Spell button. A battle option spell sprite exists in Undertale's files. While this appears to be evidence that Frisk could originally use magic in the game, it turns out this isn't the case. Despite the existence of the spell button, the sprite was never fully utilized. Toby revealed in an interview that he never had any idea on how to use it, so he just never programmed that menu option, and that there was just no point to it. Some fans really thought at one point there was going to be magic planned for Frisk, but no. It turned out this was just a useless sprite. Monster History Part 6. Left over in the files of Undertale is text for a cut Monster History Part 6 book, and it reads, "A person who has fallen down will soon perish." Well, it's cut content, so we can't take it into the lore too well, but this could have possibly been planned to be a reference to all the humans that came before Frisk. There's also a cut part 7 and 8 in the files, but it's more lore that ends up just getting described by other NPCs throughout Undertale. Vessel will return. Just like the name of the vessel and vessel creator being saved in the files of Deltarune, so are the actual customization options. So if the name gets reused in a later chapter, we may end up seeing your creation you made in Chapter 1 come back as well. Dirty Hacker Ending. If you go into the code of Undertale and set your values to be at a specific ending, instead of getting a normal ending, you'll get a special hacker ending, where Sans in the Dark calls you and says, "Hey, is anyone there? Well, just calling to ask. You really like to challenge yourself, huh? Well, good job. Just promise to not brag about it, okay? Guess I should say something else too. It's been a while, huh? I'll be honest, I have no idea what happened to you to get here. This is actually some sort of error handling message. So if you're getting this ending, tell whoever made the game, okay? They'll fix it, or if this is a novel situation, they might even add another ending to the game. Chances are, though, you're just a dirty hacker, aren't you? Yeah, get out of here." And then he hangs up the phone on you. Toby Fox is just the kind of developer to add stuff for fun. Like, I'm sure maybe 10 people came across this by themselves, not already knowing about it. And for them, it would have been amazing, but the actual number of people to stumble across this content would have been so low. It's really cool that he just adds stuff like this, even if so few people are gonna end up seeing it. Robot 98. This is Robot 98, a cut NPC from Undertale. A lot of cut NPC sprites are just test versions of other characters, but this one is one of the few fully cut characters, and it even has a talking animation. Aside from the blatant 98 on the robot's chest to give it a name, it was meant to be alongside many other robots in Hotland, but probably just didn't fit in with Mettaton already being such a big presence. Having a lot more robots would have made them a less unique character. Debug mode. By using a hex editor on Undertale's data.win file, or nowadays simply modding it, you can gain access to a debug mode, and there's tons of hidden things within it, like keybinds that instantly kill bosses, being able to change the effects on your screen mid-battle. I mean, lots of very cheaty kind of stuff to mess around with. But there is something that's really interesting that you can only see with the debug mode. The reflections of yourself in the waterfall are replaced with a sprite of an unknown character when space is pressed. According to the game's files, the character seems to be Chara, but they also look a bit like Chris from Deltarune. It's debated by people who this actually is. The related variable in the code that controls showing this alternate reflection is called death, which may indicate that this was once used after you sold Chara your soul. I don't know. I mean, Chara and Chris do look a lot alike, so I see the debate between the two. Personally, I think it looks a lot more like Chris, but if it is named Chara in the files, it's most likely a cut feature from the genocide route to show Chara taking your soul. Sans and Papyrus Undertale are from Deltarune. This is a long one. To start, Deltarune has been in development since 2012, so everything in Undertale was made around knowing what was going to happen in Deltarune, making any connection between the games a lot stronger and planned out. So there's quite a few things to point to Sans and Papyrus being from the Deltarune universe. As we know, Sans is incredibly intelligent and knows about different timelines you go through on different playthroughs, and at one point even seemingly worked with Gaster and Alphys. Sans also has at least some interest in quantum mechanics with his book that breaks a main law of quantum mechanics in Papyrus's house, but in this house, when you go to enter Sans' room, you can't. And wait, what's that look like? Under the door, there's a very odd effect. In fact, the same effect as the teleporting doors in Deltarune. Eventually, you can go in, and it's completely dark. Then the lights turn on, and Papyrus says, "Wait a second, why are you using a treadmill in the dark? Is Sans pranking you across time and space? I hate it when he does that." So, he does this a lot. I mean, he has some form of power with being able to teleport, as well as this. Well, in the drawer of his room, you can get a silver key. And with this silver key, you can open his workshop. Before we get to what's inside, it's a bit of a stretch, but some people have pointed out that this key specifically being silver could be a reference to the Lovecraft book called Through the Gates of the Silver Key. The silver key in this book being an ancient magical artifact that unlocks gates of space and time, allowing the user to access remote times and places of the universe. Now, that seems like a stretch to compare this small key to linking an entire Lovecraft story, until you see the machine behind the curtain in Sans' workshop, and all that surrounds it. The workshop is fairly small, consisting of a few drawers in this machine. The first drawer contains photos of, quote, Sans with a lot of people you don't recognize, and he looks happy. The second drawer contains some kind of badge. Then you can inspect the blueprints, and it says, you can't read the symbols they're written in. This could be seen as hinting at Gaster. Then it says, it looks like they relate to some kind of strange machine. And then the only other thing in the room is the strange machine, and it appears to be broken. There's a lot to talk about here, but first, Sans in Undertale is pretty depressed. Just outright. The signs of it are throughout the entire game, and when talking to him in the genocide fight, he states, our reports showed a massive anomaly in the time-space continuum. Timelines jumping left, right, starting, and stopping, until suddenly everything ends. That's your fault, isn't it? You can't understand how this feels, knowing that one day without any warning it's all gonna be reset. I gave up trying to go back a long time ago, and getting to the surface really doesn't appeal to me anymore either, cause even if we do, we'll end up right back here, without any memory of it, right? To be blunt, it makes it kind of hard to give it my all. Or is that just a poor excuse for being lazy? Hell if I know. All I know is seeing what comes next, I can't afford to care anymore. The things that stick out the most here are him giving up on, quote, going back a long time ago. And in the following line, he states that he doesn't care about getting to the surface, since he knows everything will be reset when the player makes a new save. So here he's not talking about going back to the surface. He's most likely distraught at the fact that he'll never see those friends in that picture in his lab again. He's so confident in the fact that he'll never see his friends again, and that the timeline will be reset when you defeat him, that he gives up on the fight. And when you defeat him, you end up making him bleed, which is something we just don't see anyone else do in the world of Undertale. After being hit with that, he sighs and says he'll be going back to Grillby's. Some fans believe the blood I just mentioned is ketchup, since he's been seen drinking that the entire time throughout the game, but red is flowing out of his mouth as well. Unless he chugged an entire bottle of ketchup right before starting the fight with you and just gagged it up when hit, this is blood. And to prove that even further, it's stated in Grillby's that, quote, monster food converts perfectly to energy right as you eat it, so it doesn't stay in you. This is blood. So he's different. No one from Undertale bleeds, and there's examples in Deltarune showing that characters there do. And the biggest part implying that him and Papyrus are from Deltarune is the song It's Raining Somewhere Else. Near the end of the game, Sans has a talk with you over some food. The track playing right now as I talk is what's playing in the scene, by the way. Well, he reminisces about his past, seeing that you're getting close to the end. Then he shares a little story. He says he's a sentry in the forest, His entire job is to kill you, but he's been friendly. This is because in the forest, he stumbled across a massive locked door. A door we know to be the one that Toriel was behind. And they exchanged jokes for hours, days. And one day, something was off. Sans had become a good friend to Toriel through the door, so he asked what was wrong. He could hear it in her voice after all. Toriel then asked Sans if any human were to exit through the door to protect them, and Sans agreed. He'd protect any human that came through, and did for you. Unless you were a genocidal maniac, he was friendly, but he makes it clear that without that promise to Toriel, he would have killed you, on the spot. Now, we know Sans. He's goofy, but he's not nearly as goofy as Papyrus. I highly doubt he'd completely disregard his job just because of a joking buddy behind a door. Okay, so there's possibly a different reason he made the promise. The track playing during this conversation is titled It's Raining Somewhere Else. Where though? Where would it be raining? Well, Toby Fox makes connections with his music. Important ones. The place where it rained, the place he's reminiscing, the place all his friends he smiled with that he can't see anymore, is Deltarune. Outside of the clear implications of some form of time and space travel, the songs lining up a decade later, why would he make a promise with Toriel? I mean, I'm sure you've heard someone's voice who you'd recognize behind a door, especially if they were someone who agreed to be dragged out of choir practice just to spend the night dancing and drinking. At the end of Deltarune Chapter 4, where we hear this song as well. I wholeheartedly believe that Sans is from Deltarune. There's multiple other things that point to this too, like at the end of the True Pacifist ending, him knowing what the sun is when no one else did. But what about Papyrus? Well, there was a Tumblr interview with Papyrus, like the one I mentioned earlier with his favorite food. And in this interview, Papyrus was asked, "What was your life before Snowdin?" And he states, "There was green, grass," and then Sans cuts him off, most likely not wanting other people to know where they came from. And you may say, well, in the True Pacifist ending, Papyrus doesn't know what to call the sun. Well, Papyrus pretty much completely forgot about the human when Sans pointed out a rock in front of them, so he's not the sharpest tool in the shed. Plus, Sans' crossword is directly from Deltarune. When Papyrus and Sans are setting you through different challenges, Sans has a crossword he puts on the floor. On this crossword, starring a Icy character. It seems to be like it's from a restaurant with Icy as its mascot, and there's nothing mentioned about this Icy in Undertale. But in Deltarune, the entire restaurant is there. Same mascot and all. This crossword is without a doubt from there. And the very last piece to the puzzle is in Snowdin, where they live. The shopkeep says, "The two of them, brothers I think, they just showed up one day and asserted themselves." And she doesn't point this out about anyone else. Sans and Papyrus aren't from the underground, and I believe they aren't from Undertale. They just appeared one day and completely shaped the entire story in an insane way. Also, circling back to Gaster, with entry 17, it says, "Dark, darker, and darker. Darkness keeps growing. Shadows growing deeper. Photons reading negative. The next experiment seems very, very interesting." Well, we know that Gaster wrote this entry and he's anything but normal, being scattered across time and space. And Toby Fox is one for having some pretty unique storytelling. So leading up to the surprise release of Deltarune, Toby Fox had multiple tweets acting as a character who seemed to be Gaster, writing in Gaster's signature fragmented sentence structure, and having them say very, very interesting on multiple tweets, a line only said by Gaster. So assuming that Gaster was writing these tweets leading to the launch of Deltarune, in the same format as the log entries in the True Lab and using very, very interesting, this may mean that the entire Dark World is another one of Gaster's experiments. After all, entry 17 was filled with mentions of no light. Just pure darkness. And in Deltarune, that's what you need to access the Dark World. And going along with Gaster being the one doing the tweets, Gaster then tweets, "I look forward to creating a new future with you." And in log entry 5 of the True Lab, he says that the resolve to change fate is called determination, able to create a possible new future. The device letting him change fate with the power harnessed. So is this new future Deltarune? Gaster's primarily in Undertale, but all references to him aren't only in Undertale. Throughout Deltarune, you can hear his motif in a lot of different songs, and there's some more blatant references to him as well, like the hidden entry 17 music you can hear when you use your cell phone in the Dark World in Deltarune. It's the same exact sounds. And not only can you hear it in the Dark World from the cell phone, if you stand outside the bunker, and I kid you not because this really sounds like some playground rumor, increase the audio speed by 666%, repeated 6s being associated with Gaster, you can hear the same sounds. Now, this connection seems like a bit of an issue with Sans and Papyrus being from Deltarune. If Deltarune is this new future, new experiment by Gaster, how could it be the future if Sans and Papyrus were there from the past, and are already affected by things from it? Well, I'd say the machine covers this. It's fairly clear that the machine is implied to have the ability to travel space and time, so I'd say for now that fills any plot holes, but Deltarune is also not done. We're just a bit past the halfway point, and this entire theory could fall apart. Basically, if you didn't understand any of the time and space stuff, which is very complicated, very hard to describe, there's just a lot of stuff connecting Sans and Gaster from Deltarune to Undertale. There's too many connections to not bring it up at all, and the whole thing of him promising to not hurt any humans, completely disregarding his one job, it's just incredibly intriguing to not bring up. Everyman. This is Everyman, a sort of reoccurring Easter egg character in both Undertale and Deltarune. In Undertale, he shows up in the fight with the Reaper Bird Amalgamite, where he just kinda stands there doing nothing. And that's really it for the Undertale side of his appearances. Deltarune has many more, like showing up in graffiti, being a part of Jevel's attacks, being in the pop-ups in Chapter 2. Everyman just shows up everywhere, and we don't really know much about him. We don't really know anything at all about him, actually. Tier 3. Your best friend plagiarized the fun song. I don't know if I'd go as far to say as the best friend song is a plagiarized or copied version of the fun song from SpongeBob, but intentional or not, the best friend song sounds extremely similar to the fun song in SpongeBob. I'll play the two here, and yeah, it does shockingly sound very similar. Rock Candy. There's an item called Rock Candy that was cut before the release of Undertale, but the text for it remains in the game if you mod it a bit. It'll say, "You took a piece. Boy, that's heavy." This rock candy was replaced by the spider bake sale, but the technique to see this unused text can be used to see a lot of weird cut things throughout the game, rock candy being one of very many. Rousey's Manual. Normally Rousey's Manual can only be used to tire enemies, but left over in the files is an entire drawn manual. The footage here is modding it back in, and in the manual are some features that were cut, like a talk option outside of battle as a button when you pause. I'll talk more about this manual later as it ties into some pretty weird stuff. Hush Puppy. If you trade a hot dog with the annoying dog at the resort, you get the Hush Puppy item, and you can use this later on against the Endogeny Amalgamite to make it immediately pacify and sparable. Not much more to say about this item, just a nice skip of a fight later on in the game, and it's a very odd out-of-your-way item to get, just a nice way to skip this Amalgamite. Papyrus's Cool Song. According to the Kickstarter pledges of Undertale, 2 people got a version of the game where the entire soundtrack was replaced by the Papyrus Cool Song. The song that's playing in the background now is the Papyrus Cool Song, but yeah, apparently only 2 people got this version of the game. Papyrus's special attack is a Gaster Blaster. Since Sans has a Gaster Blaster as his special attack, people have theorized that Papyrus does as well. While turning your heart blue for the fight could be seen as a special attack, he only mentions the special attack after he's already turned your heart blue. And when he goes to do this special attack, it turns out that a dog chewing a bone replaced the attack. So while it would make sense if Papyrus was maybe given a Gaster Blaster by Sans, we'll never know. His special attack was just replaced by a dog. Alfie's ordered the pizza. Getting a phone call with someone ordering a pizza is one of the fun value events, and it's a pretty common one too. Well, if you've played Undertale before and got the call on maybe another playthrough, you'd recognize the text-speaking voice is Alfie's. It's a small thing, but Alfie's is for sure the one ordering the pizza. If you compare the 2 voices, it's for sure her. Game FAQ Best Game Ever Contest Controversy. The Game FAQ site held a contest for the best game ever, and obvious picks for the time were Mass Effect 3, Fallout 3, Super Mario World, Ocarina of Time. They were all good choices and were on the list, but Undertale ended up winning the contest. It was primarily due to the Undertale community spreading the word across places like Tumblr to help get more votes, and this caused a bit of a controversy. Obviously, what Game FAQ says doesn't really matter, like there's no quote best game of all time, it's just subjective to the fans, but some people were really mad at Undertale fans for doing this. Undertale had won by a landslide. Basically, it's dumb drama that got way out of hand and people forgot about it months later. Hidden objects and plushies. Fangamer is the place to get all official Undertale and Deltarune merch, and plushies were a big part of the merch drops for both of these games. And with these plushies came some hidden secrets. So Toriel here has a little soul inside of her, Undyne has her other special eye, Papyrus has the dog that stole his special attack, Sans has the blood inside him, Temmie has Temmie Flakes, and Nabstablook has a ghost sandwich. All plushies for these games have some sort of hidden secret inside of them. Snowdin Background House. While wandering around Snowdin, if you head south, right by this cave, you can see a house off in the background with someone going outside, walking around for a bit, going back inside, and repeating. And that's all we know about this place. It's still there even at the end of the Genocide run, so it's probably not a monster you've met, it's still a mystery. It's most likely just a little background character that Toby threw in, but it'd be nice if they were given some type of identity. Tier 4. Alarm Clock Dialogue confirms Flowey leaves the underground. The Kickstarter for Undertale had all of its goals reached. They were funded way over what they needed. And one of these goals was to have an Undertale-themed alarm clock app. And through a series of delays and, well, multiple reasons, the app ended up getting cancelled, but Toby Fox didn't want all the dialogue to go to waste. So for the 5th anniversary of Undertale, he put all the dialogue that would have been in the app on a site for everyone to read. So this is canon and takes place after the events of Undertale. And part of Flowey's story after Undertale is that after the True Pacifist route, he left the underground and still hangs out with Papyrus, most likely not having any murderous intent anymore, especially because he can't save and reset. Frisk's absence in the alarm clock dialogue. While Frisk is never mentioned by name in the alarm clock dialogue, a lot of the entries are a character talking to someone, which with the True Pacifist ending, we can assume it's Frisk. Unfortunately, we don't really get to know more about them than they made it out. Through the dialogue, we can tell that, they're probably living a decent life. I mean, they're still talking to everyone, but nothing really personal about them at all. Suzy equals Suzy. One of the more rare fun events in Undertale is coming across Clam Girl. Clam Girl's dialogue goes, "I'm visiting Waterfall from the city. My neighbor's daughter looks about your age. Her name is Suzy." Suzy being in yellow text. "And I feel like you two should be friends. You have a neighbor's blessing. Not knowing where I live is no issue. Fate finds a way. In life's grand scheme, she may be the reason you came here in the first place." So she mentions a character named Suzy, S-U-Z-Y, so people believe this was the Undertale version of Suzy from Deltarune. And off name alone, it being highlighted in yellow text does show some significance, but it was practically confirmed when the Switch version of Undertale, which was released in September of 2018, had a bit of an update to the encounter. Clam Girl then says, "So you never met my neighbor's daughter, but please don't despair, because the time that you will meet her is fast approaching." And then she goes gray like the other Goner NPCs and disappears. Deltarune's first chapter was released in a demo in October of 2018, so just a month after the Switch version came out. So this fits the coming soon claim. And I'm pretty sold on this theory. I can't think of any holes in it. Plus something really interesting is in Sans' workshop there's a photo album inside a drawer, and there's photos of Sans with, quote, "a lot of people you don't recognize. He looks happy." And that's already really intriguing, and I talked about that earlier. But after you meet Clam Girl, if you go there, the text changes to, "There's a photo album inside the drawer. There are photos of," huh? A card is sticking out from the back flap of the binder. It's a poorly drawn picture of 3 smiling people. Written on it, "Don't forget." Sound familiar? The ending song of Chapter 1 of Deltarune is called Don't Forget. Just another insane connection between the two games, and updating Clam Girl's dialogue right before Deltarune comes out is just a super unique idea. Rousey Flowey connections. So I already talked about how Rousey is an anagram for Asriel, but there's even more ties between the two characters, mainly with Asriel's Flowey form. Specifically, their description of the soul is near identical, almost word for word. Flowey says they'll be the prince of a world's future, and Rousey is a prince, and the text used on the unused manual in Deltarune is very similar to a page from Undertale's unused manual. Basically, there's tons of connections between these two characters. I don't know if I'd say it confirms Rousey is Asriel or Flowey or anything yet, but there's for sure a very strong chance. I mean, it seems heavily hinted at. Why are there gift boxes in New Home? In the New Home at the end of Undertale, there's a knife and a heart-shaped locket inside of these 2 gift boxes. Why are they here? Well, we don't really know. Some fans seem to think it's an homage to Earthbound and comparing the sprites of Earthbound to these. it for sure looks like it, and after all, Earthbound and Yume Nikki were big inspirations for this game, so it would make sense. But who left these though, and why they're fully here is up for debate. They seem to be the items of Chara and Azrael. They could have just been left there by them. Metaton quiz unused questions. There's some unused questions that Metaton was originally going to quiz you with, left over in the files of Undertale. There's one asking, what's a pretzel's favorite color, which I couldn't find the answer to that one, but the other is, how bright is this text? And the answer would have been 85% bright. I have no idea what the pretzel one could have been hinting to, or if it was a joke or something, and the brightness, it's just kind of random. It does seem kind of similar quality to the question where it asks how many letters spell Metaton and then you just have to look at alphys for the answer. From what I could find, it seems that it was only these two questions that ended up getting cut. Killing Vegetoids by eating them. In the demo of Undertale, it was possible to kill Vegetoids by eating them with an act command. You can't do this anymore, but if you could, I would imagine this counts towards the kill counter, scrapping a pacifist route. It'd just be crazy if something in the act screen would let you kill someone on final release. Since mainly if you're doing a pacifist route, as long as you're on the act screen, you don't have to worry about accidentally hitting and killing the enemy. Regular animals. The only mentions of real non-monster animals in Undertale and Deltarune are just two references. First, there's snails mentioned in Toriel's book, and second, there's birds mentioned chirping around Asgore's castle. You'd think for the two games, as massive as they are, that there would be any more mentions of real animals, but no. Even Frogget doesn't count as a frog because it's considered a monster. Tier 5. Korean Demo. There's a Korean demo of Undertale. It's an unofficial translation of the original English demo from an earlier build of the game, released by, well, we don't know who released it. It came out about a year after the initial demo, and it has a lot of differences from the final game. Like outdated graphics, music, old sprites. The whole version of the game is just really weird, and no one knows who released this version of it. Doge in Undertale demo. Like I mentioned earlier, there was a cut Doge enemy in Undertale, but it turns out in the demo of the game, you could just spawn him in. This footage is obviously a bit messed up. They're using a custom font and everything. It's a jumbled mess. But the code for Doge still existed in the files, and you could just spawn him back in the demo. Courage. Just like determination, courage is a word that stands out in Deltarune. The name of the song When You Die in Undertale is called Determination, something you get reminded of every time you save. Points throughout the game giving you determination to continue. The song When You Die in Deltarune is called Faint Courage, so you'd think it holds a pretty similar level of importance. Well, in Chapter 1, it for sure seems that way. It's highlighted in bold yellow when Rousey is describing the legend of Deltarune, your quest throughout the entire game, and that you'll need courage. And at the end of Chapter 1, when battling the king, your talk action becomes courage used to defeat him. But for some reason, these are really the only two significant signs of the word. In fact, throughout the entire game, so far it's only been used in those two scenarios, and when talking to Noelle in Chapter 2, when she starts her arc of gaining courage to become a hero throughout the chapter. We're still pretty early on in Deltarune. I mean, Chapter 4 is just past the halfway point, and the last 3 chapters I would imagine are going to be a pretty similar length to the first 4. I have a feeling we're more exactly halfway than a bit past, so the word could come to mean something incredibly significant like determination did, but as of now, it seems as it's only hints to a bigger importance in the whole story of Deltarune. Sans unused attacks. Sans has tons of unused attacks left over in the files of Undertale, and some of them seen are just downright unfair. They can be re-implemented through modding the game, that's this footage right now, but instead of the normal Sans attacks, it's almost all platforming with incredibly hard timing between them. These attacks are just ridiculous, but there was also a cut Gaster blaster attack, where instead of the 4 blasters shooting in a pretty obvious location, this time it's more random, just based off where you last were. This attack seems pretty fair, honestly. It doesn't seem that bad to avoid, but the platforming ones are rough. Undertale Extra Comics and? The Kickstarter goals for Undertale were all met, with the last one being $45,000 to get Undertale Extra Comics and possibly another game. Well, we're getting Deltarune, but it wasn't until March 30th, 2023 that we got the first and current only Undertale comic. But it's pretty good. It's through Fangamer, and it's a character profile of everyone that goes to Grillby's. I'd say the most interesting one here for sure is on Sans. It talks about how he just showed up one day acting like a regular, asked for his regular order, and since he made everyone laugh, everyone agreed to just accept him as one of the old customers. It just adds to the whole him and Papyrus being from Deltarune thing. Also, tons of characters like Grilby get their own profile. He's probably up there for one of my favorite characters, and it's just nice to read. See you in the next hell, losers. There's a bit of unused dialogue from Rousey left over in Deltarune. It's him saying, "See you in the next hell, losers," when fleeing from a battle. Knowing that Rousey has way more knowledge about what's going on in the world of Deltarune makes this really intriguing. It could possibly be for a future location that resembles Hell in some way, but this also just seems out of place and not really Rousey's style. There's a lot of theories that talk about how Rousey might turn on us and be evil, but generally I disagree with that. This for sure sounds like some more Flowey-esque dialogue that could tie them together more, and maybe that does lead to something, but for now, we don't know what's gonna happen with Rousey, but this unused dialogue is really weird. Flowey discount. On Fangamer, you used to be able to get the Determination Combo, a bundle of Undertale merchandise, and when you clicked on it, there was a little Flowey pop-up that said, "Hey, $54 is a lot of money, huh? Do you want a discount?" If you clicked no, it would open a new Google page with a search bar saying, "Cartoons for loser babies" or whatever. If you clicked yes, you'd get $1 off the combo, but something in the combo changed. The normal combo would come with this nice little postcard from the Undertale cast, but if you took the $1 off, it would be replaced with all the cast but Chara scratched out in red. Yeah, that's for sure something I've never seen done with a merch site before. I see why Toby Fox only likes working with Fangamer. Unused Asgore attack. Like how Sans has cut attacks, Asgore seems to as well, or at least animations of an attack. All the sprites were left over in the files, so someone reanimated them together, and that's what I'm showing now. Asgore does have a really creepy looking roar, presumably before doing this cut attack, and some characters like Flowey can be pretty creepy at times, but this roar before the cut attack is just kinda disturbing looking. Tier 6. Fun value 64. The different fun values of Undertale give you different strange encounters. Specifically, the values being in the range of 60 are all tied to Gaster, but for some reason, value 64 is missing. This could be a simple split in the values, like there's other values that are missing like 58 to 60 and 67 to 79, but it's strange that right here a value is missing. Right next to it are the Gaster followers, sound test room, and mystery man encounter, so you'd think this would have been something interesting, but no. I just hope that if something was planned to be here, it got moved to a different fun value and not entirely cut. All the values in this range are super integral to most theories between Undertale and Deltarune. Metaton knows Frisk can save. In the musical number by Metaton, one of the lines goes, "You'll die a lot," possibly hinting that Metaton knows a player can save, something that not many characters know. Or this could simply just be a silly line they threw in to fit with the music, which off Metaton's personality would make sense. But also, it's Metaton, an advanced being that knows a lot. I could see both sides of the argument. Considering Alphys presumably helped Gaster make the whole true lab and she created Metaton, I could see some otherworldly knowledge of saving and loading being passed on to Metaton, but it could also have just been a line to throw into rhyme. 21X is in the far past. Undertale seems to take place in the far future, implied by the last fallen human having been so long ago that nobody can remember what a human looks like. And in the intro where it shows Mount Ebot, it says 21X, being when the first human fell. So if it's been so long since the last human fell that monsters forgot what they looked like, and Chara fell down in the 2010s, Undertale must take place quite a good number of years in the future. Donkey Kong is my favorite Marvel superhero. There's a variable that makes it so the GUI moves when Frisk moves, and this variable is labeled Donkey Kong is my favorite Marvel hero. Yeah, just a very silly and long name for a key variable that's sorta integral for all of Undertale to work. Royal Sciences LLC. The trademark for Undertale and Deltarune are registered under Royal Sciences LLC, which seems to be a reference to the royal scientists in Undertale. Just pretty cool for Toby Fox to name his company off Undertale. Unintentionally skipped lines. Some lines in Undertale were skipped over by the game due to scripting errors. This was fixed after a while of some lines not working, but a good chunk of players who played Undertale right when it came out missed on some pretty important parts of the dialogue. The one behind you, with the creepy smile. There's some unused dialogue from Undertale that's from an unknown NPC, and it's kinda creepy. It reads, "Excuse me, yes you, in the striped shirt. Can you do something about your friend? Yes, your friend." The one behind you with the creepy smile? Where'd your friend go? Now, the files don't say where this is, and there's obviously no context as to who our friend is, but as always with seemingly everything in this game, people seem to think it's Gaster. I don't completely disagree this time. It could be possible. You know, he has the ability to randomly vanish, but I find it more likely that it's either Flowey or Sans, since they have creepy smiles and some otherworldly abilities. I don't think it's Flowey. They don't follow you ever. I mean, Sans could also fit the description, having a creepy smile, but considering you only follow him twice, I really doubt this is him either. Just a bit of creepy dialogue that we don't know who it's referring to. What an interesting behavior. If you try and mess around with the save files before completing Chapter 1 of Deltarune, you get some special eerie text prompts from doing so, such as, "It is barren and cannot be copied," if selecting an empty save file, or "It will be subsumed," if overwriting an existing save. What an interesting behavior, overwriting a file after all files are identical, and very interesting when, quote, threatening a file with being erased 10 times. Going to erase it and not actually doing so. The text prompts will turn back to normal once you complete Chapter 1, and the eerie text is never seen again, unless you start a new game. But if all the stuff leading to the release of Deltarune and Entry 17 do link, which, I mean, they really seem to, this seems to be referencing Gaster again, saying extremely similar things like very interesting, what an interesting behavior. There's just so many parallels and other hints to Gaster throughout Deltarune that it really seems like this is Gaster talking to you on the main screen when you go to start a save. Illustration of a monster with human soul and waterfall was supposed to look like Photoshop Flowey. In the waterfall, there's a sign that reads, "It's an illustration of a strange creature," but you don't actually get to see it. It's just text there. Well, in the concept art book, Toby shows this drawing that was originally going to be on the wall, and it heavily resembles Photoshop Flowey. It says in concept art that it got scrapped because it didn't make any sense being there, and yeah, it wouldn't really make any sense being there. It's a good sort of representation of Flowey's form, but unless Toby Fox was wanting to hint more to the whole time travel aspect and Flowey having this incredible power at the end, it makes sense to have cut it. Flowey mimicking Sham's eye. At the beginning of the fight with Photoshop Flowey, or Omega Flowey, the name's interchangeable, Flowey seems to be mimicking Sham's eye. Sham from Deltarune's eye. He changes his face to a rotating disc with 3 eyes, and it heavily resembles Sham's button eye. This one, I've got no clue. There's no reason why Flowey would even know about Sham. Sham isn't an Undertale, and there's not like there's any references to him in Undertale. It's just a very odd thing to do if Flowey doesn't know Sham. This is just one of those things where we'll have to wait and see if this actually means anything when more chapters of Deltarune come out. Alfie's lab screen, a static image in OS X and Linux versions. In the OS X and Linux versions of Undertale, the screen in Alfie's lab doesn't follow the player around like it's meant to. Instead, for some reason, OS X and Linux don't support GameMaker, the way the Undertale was made, so this image was made for a fallback if an error occurred in rendering the sequence of following Frisk. So instead of getting the cool sort of follow screen, they just get a static image instead. Tier 8. Toby saw Deltarune's ending in a fever dream. When asked in a Nintendo interview about the making of Deltarune, one of the questions was, how long has the idea of Deltarune been kicking around in your head? And Toby Fox responded that the ending of Deltarune he saw in a fever dream in 2011. The whole story that people have been theorizing on for years was based off a fever dream. That's awesome. Temmie Chang didn't design Temmie. This is the original sketch of Temmie, one of the most popular characters in Undertale, and the whole character was named off Temmie Chang, one of the main artists who worked on the game. Temmie was originally a doodle of Temmie Chang by another developer as a joke, with its appearance being based on Temmie's likes, interest, and personality traits. Just funny that Temmie, arguably the second most popular dev of Undertale, didn't even design the character based off her. Deltarune uninstaller wiping folders. Due to an oversight on Toby's part, the uninstaller for Deltarune wipes all files in the folder Deltarune was installed in, instead of just the files the installer created. Meaning if you install, say, I don't know, the hit game Chairs in a games folder that also held all of the Deltarune files, and used the Deltarune uninstaller, both games would be completely gone. This isn't a big deal, especially considering Steam makes subfolders for entire games, but for the few who came across this coding error, that really sucks. Mettaton was supposed to appear in Snowden Tile Puzzle. There's unused lines for Mettaton that suggest the character was originally going to be in Snowdin, having something to do with the puzzle made by Alphys. This unfortunately got cut, just leaving us with the encounters of Mettaton and Hotland. Ball. When starting up Undertale, if you type ball on the intro cinematic, this'll play. The snippet is called Mystery. I'll play the full version for the next couple of entries, but the only way to hear this sound is by typing out ball on your keyboard in the intro cinematic. Muffet doomed monster kind in genocide. On a genocide playthrough, it's explained by Muffet that Alphys tried evacuating her and all the other spiders away from their home, so Alphys could seal the place off to stop the human. But being so proud of being a spider and not wanting to leave her home, Muffet declined. So the player getting to Asgore on the genocide route of Undertale is indirectly Muffet's fault. I mean, you can say that about a lot of the different characters, but if her and her group of spiders just moved, nothing bad would have happened. mus_smile spectrogram. If you put mus_smile into a spectrogram, the audio playing right now, you get this, an image of a very oddly shaped face. Toby Fox said this wasn't intended, but the similarities to this and Gaster were of course drawn. Sure, it's not perfect, and he did say it wasn't intentional, but either way it's kinda just strange that they line up so well. Deltarune.com/him.png was an image on Deltarune.com that was there since 2015, but has now been removed. We still have the old image, tons of people saved it, but if you look really close you can see something is written in wingdings. And it translates to, "This next experiment seems very, very interesting." And since 2016, we've got an updated one. And if we translate what's there, it says, "3 heroes appeared to banish the angel's heaven." Obviously hinting at Deltarune, but the first one being a pretty significant tie to Gaster, speaking in wingdings, paralleling what he said in entry 17, and leading to the launch of Deltarune from the Twitter page. This is just another one of the many ties between Gaster and Deltarune. Those pathetic people that want to see it but are too weak to do it themselves. In the genocide run, Flowey says, "At least we're better than those sickos that stand around and watch it happening. Those pathetic people who want to see it but are too weak to do it themselves. I bet someone like that is watching right now, aren't they?" This could be referring to Alphys, Asgore, Chara. This could be referring to a lot of different characters. But I'm fairly certain this refers to the people who looked up the genocide route and not played it themselves, because of how rough it is to get through that route, which is me. Yeah, I felt too awful doing the genocide route and just watched Jacksepticeye's playthrough of it. I'm almost certain this is just referring to people who watched the genocide route. With Flowey breaking the fourth wall so much, it'd make sense. Activity level. You can see the activity level screen in the menu of Undertale by pressing the Shift key or X key 5 times. It shows which of the major endings or activity levels you've completed on your save. If no ending has been completed, it says no information. Just a weird debug screen that probably wasn't intended to be seen by the players. And that is the end of the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Whatever you may think about the different theories in this video, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. I would also adore doing another video on Undertale or Deltarune. I'm just having a lot of fun on it. Most likely wouldn't be an Iceberg video, it'd be a theory or something. I've just had so much fun working on this video. Let me know in the comments if you guys would want to see that. But yeah, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, week, month, and I'll see you in the next one.